Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to your setting your values, boundaries, and tolerations training. Today, we're going to cover your personal values, how to set those values and recognize what they are, how to then set your boundaries in accordance to those values. And then we're going to look at the things that you're tolerating in life, particularly from outside of yourself, which aren't in line with the values that you've set and your personal values. This will help you to create the life it is that you really want to live, because we spend a lot of time wavering our boundaries, tolerating things that we really shouldn't be tolerating. Some of those things we don't even realise that we're tolerating until we start to look back. Now we'll move on. Tolerations is quite a big area. Today we're mainly going to talk about what you're tolerating from other people, from your outside environment. At another stage, I will do tolerations from within yourself. Tolerations can be things that you're not completing, like tasks you're not completing yourself. That magic word, procrastination, overwhelm, that is created internally within yourself because there are some limiting beliefs that are stopping you from doing the things that you need to do. So you're tolerating stuff internally. I'm going to do that on a separate day. So we're going to go deeper into that on its own. But the first stage is to work out your values, set those boundaries, and then work out the tolerations. Things you should be saying no to and things you should be saying yes to. We have to put those fundamentally in place before we can go any deeper. Now, with anything that I do with any clients or within myself, I go deep. There's a lot of people who will do quite a lot of this stuff with you, but it'll be at what I class a puddle level. Well, I don't do puddle. If we want to get to a place where you create the life you really want to live, then we need to go deeper. We need to address those things and ask those questions that we're too scared to ask ourselves. And if you're too scared to ask yourselves that question, that's fine, because you can certainly rely on me to ask you them instead. So let's get on. If you've got a pen and notepaper, that will be really handy at this stage. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, what are personal values? What are the meaning of values? Now, there's different ways that people explain this. So values, they're the things that are the most important to you within your life. So for example, some of my values, my personal values, are honesty, integrity, trust, respect. Some of these values I have taken on from when I was a child. Some of these values are my family values that my parents installed in me. My parents have certain values that I have chosen to leave behind because they don't serve me as a person in my adult life. And that's absolutely fine. What we're wanting to do is find your individual personal values that serve you, that you live by, your fundamentals for your life. I call your personal values your absolute non-negotiables in life. If you can think about what your non-negotiables are, that will help you determine what your personal values are. Everyone's values are individual and different. Your personal values are not right or wrong in accordance to anybody else's. We all look at other people to see what their values may be. If your values and their values are different, that doesn't make yours wrong or theirs right, or vice versa. As you go into relationships, you will discover that other people have different values to you within your relationship, and that's okay. What you need to do is make sure that they are aware of your values. Some people might have values that you feel very, very strongly against. Well, I would suggest that if somebody has values that are so way off from yours, that relationship potentially isn't going to work, because you're just not going to be living in any kind of harmony. It may work in the short term, but for long-term relationships, it's very difficult if your values are so totally different. The other thing we find in life when it comes to our values, and why a lot of people don't know what their values are or can't remember their values, is that they've taken on somebody else's values. And going back to those long-term relationships, or relationships that we get into, particularly of a romantic nature, we find that we take on that person's values. Now that may be their family values, and that may be their personal values. Our values can then sort of get swept under the carpet a little bit. If that person's values are very strong, they're a very strong character, and you are surrounded with those values, it can make you start to doubt your own personal values, and you can get swept along on the wave of somebody else's and some other families. I find this quite a lot with people that I work with, and I've done this myself. For quite a long time, I went along with some of my partner's family values and outside influence values. And I found myself in a place of stress and anxiety, but I couldn't work out why. And I was rubbing along and just carrying on and getting myself further and further and deeper into this place where I was a little bit like, I don't really know who I am. I don't really know what's happening, what's going on. And it wasn't until I then did the work on my own values and looked and thought, right, what are my personal values? I went back to my family values, and I realised that I was living somebody else's values, that I'd got swept along with it. I'd become a bit subservient. I just went along with it so as, classically, not to rock the boat, not to upset anyone, to keep the peace. We've all said these to people. I went along with it to keep the peace. Oh, I did this to keep the peace. Well, whose peace are you keeping? Because you're definitely not keeping yours. Because this stacks up, and carries on stacking up until the person whose peace is absolutely shattered is yours. Because you're not living who you're meant to be. So I'd like you to ask yourself, while you're looking at and noting down what your values are, you'll find you can write some down straight away, because you'll have ones that are very strong, that you know instantly. You may find, or you will find, that maybe in a week's time or something, while it's still in the back of your mind and now you're aware of it, something will happen and you'll go, oh, that's not in keeping with a value. Oh, I didn't actually realise that is a value, but that is a value of mine. And this will become clearer once we've done your boundaries and your tolerations. So a way to help you to look at your values and determine some of those maybe less obvious ones, the ones sometimes you might have been ignoring, but actually really they're there and they need to be reinstated, is to go back to a time, think of a time in your mind where you were really happy. Life was sailing along, everything was great, things were all falling into place, and work out what was happening there. What was life like? How were you living? Also, look at a proudest moment that you've had, when you felt really proud of something that you've achieved and what you've done. You will realise that you were in alignment then and living and working to your values. This also works on the flip side, so go there as well. So identify the opposite to see where you weren't living or honouring your values. Now this happened to me, something happened back last year. It took a little while for me to get over it. It was quite a big thing and I had to keep thinking about it, and I was going over and over and over and over and over it. And then I realised that what had happened and why I still felt so strongly about what happened was because it was so against my values as a person and my boundaries. A boundary had been crossed massively. And I tolerated something that no way I should have tolerated. Yeah, it wasn't deserved, it should never have happened. And I tolerated it and I sat on it. And I started to get anxiety and stress, and it's all I could think about. It became all consuming until I realised that that had gone against, and I hadn't honoured and acted in alignment with my values. And I now know that that is there, it's very strong, and it's always been there, but I just sort of let it get buried a little bit underneath some other stuff that was happening. But now I know that is there, that boundary has now been set in place. It won't be tolerated. It's been communicated as well that that is a boundary and this is certain stuff that won't be tolerated. So that's now set. And I feel so much better knowing that that is now set and I have communicated that. Other people will try to cross your boundaries. Other people will try and crumble your values to suit themselves. It's human nature. People do it all the time. We probably do. Everybody does it. We don't realise we're doing it. And a lot of time we don't realise we're doing it is because people haven't communicated to us what their values are. We all think we know what other people are thinking. We don't. We only know what we think they're thinking, which is totally different to what they're actually thinking. So if we don't communicate these things to those around us, those closest to us, whether it be in personal relationships or business, career relationships, people don't know. So communicating these values to other people is also crucial. And people need to learn to respect those. And that comes as well with the boundaries. Even more so when you start setting those boundaries in accordance with your values. Now, some of those values, like I mentioned, you may have had when you were younger. They may be family values. But as we get older and we grow as people, our values can change. So it's always good to check back in with your values that you have set and review them. There may be some that have changed. Your circumstances change as you grow as a person, as you get older, as you may change relationships. As your children grow older and you have slightly different relationships with them. And there may be some values that you need to bring back in. And there may be some values you can let go of because actually they're not important anymore. You don't need those values as much as you needed to. You can adapt them. Values are non-negotiables in your life. For everything in life, there has to be there has to be some flexibility because things change, circumstances change, people change. So that's how to set your values. And that's explaining more about what values are and the importance of having those values in place. Once you have those personal values in place, it's much easier to then put your business values in place if you run a business, or your values in place within your career. You need values across your whole life. Personal relationships, relationships with those at work, relationships with just the people you meet around you, your friends, business partners, business associates, contractors, staff. There has to be values, and those values have to be known by the people around you. Otherwise, they are forever going to be trying to break into those boundaries, and you're forever going to have to be fighting off and pushing back, wondering, why don't these people get it? Well, these people don't get it because you've not explained it to them. They don't know, because you've assumed that they should know. In personal relationships, just because you've been with somebody for however many years, a value may have changed. Something will have changed. And you're going to think that they should know that. They should know that. They should know what my value is. And they should know that that's a no-no. They should know that's a no-no. No one is a mind reader. You need to make sure people are aware. Communicating is another tricky one for people, especially when they're trying to communicate this kind of big stuff. So again, I will do communication separately, and we will do something on how to communicate in order to get the results that you're after, but also to make people understand and allow yourself to move forward with them. And a lot of that comes back to some of those negative words that I've been putting in my Female Mindset Society group of not to use, because we shouldn't be using them with ourselves, but we also shouldn't be using them with other people if we are to communicate effectively. So let's move on to boundaries. I love boundaries, and they are absolutely fundamental. People don't like to set boundaries. People don't like to be on the receiving end of boundaries. Egos get massively in the way here. And this is another reason why how you communicate your boundaries to people is so important. You have to take your ego away. Leave your ego at the door. Don't talk to people through your ego. Yeah, speak with kindness. Speak to people, communicate with people how you would want to receive that information yourself. So you have a boundary. Why do we need boundaries? Well, we need boundaries, for healthy relationships. No matter what relationship that is, we need those boundaries in place. If we don't have those boundaries in place, that can lead to stress and anxiety for us, because we've not set those boundaries, because someone will come and cross those boundaries. Someone will push and push and push. Particular people will push and poke and poke and poke at those boundaries. And if your boundary falls over like a bit of paper in the breeze, every boundary that they feel that may be there, they're going to know that they can just get that boundary and go, their boundaries don't mean anything. Boundaries, it doesn't matter. They're boundaries. They don't keep to their boundaries. They'll let you railroad them. In fact, you can tractor all over their boundaries. Now, with boundaries, there does need to be a little bit of flexibility depending on the boundary and the relationship you have with that person. But again, the communication is key as to how you speak to people and let people know about certain boundaries. Boundaries are healthy, and we all need healthy boundaries. Not just for ourselves, but once you put those healthy boundaries in place, you will find that people start to respect those boundaries and treat you differently, more positively, more respectfully. And that can only be a good thing for you and for them, because it actually then gets them to start thinking about their boundaries. Do I need to set some boundaries? Oh, I've got some boundaries. In relationships, it's not just you communicating your boundaries. You need other people to let you know what their boundaries are so that you don't cross them. So why do people react when you put them in place to start off with? Well, if your boundaries have been a bit wishy-washy or a bit, being blown over like a bit of paper, people will get used to that. And that is how they will treat you. And there's a saying that be careful how you treat yourself because you are teaching others how to treat you. And this is where boundaries come in. So they start to react when you then start to enforce boundaries. Because it's a shock to them. They will be like, where on earth has this come from? I used to be able to railroad this boundary. I used to be able to just sort of do what I like and they just put up with it to keep the peace. But now they're going, no, I won't be having that. And to start off with, people will start to think you're being awkward, you're a bit crazy, there's something wrong with you. No, don't allow people to let you think that, because what you are doing is now putting those boundaries in place that need to be there for you and for them. Keep going, have faith in yourself, and know that the boundaries that you are setting are in accordance to your values. And your values, that's who you are as a person. That is fundamentally non-negotiable who you are. So keep those boundaries strong. And don't allow people to waver those boundaries. If they try to waver those boundaries, explain to them people why those boundaries are there and how it makes you feel when those boundaries are crossed. If people are consistently, even though they know those boundaries are there, consistently crossing those boundaries, then in all honesty, you need to look at those relationships. Are they relationships that you really want in your life? Because people should respect your boundaries and you should respect other people's. Stick into your guns, like I've just said, stick to your guns. Make sure you stick to your guns because eventually they will get used to it and they will stop trying to push the boundaries. Everything has to be practiced. Everything has to become a habit. And it takes time sometimes for they to become a habit. So you have to keep pushing back. So it can become sometimes a little bit, you say in a relationship, oh, we're in a little bit of a power struggle at the moment. That's because you've got your boundaries, and you're both a little bit like this. But then eventually it settles down because you suddenly realise, well, actually, no, do you know what? They're right and I shouldn't be and they should be. And if you actually look within yourself as to what you can do differently, that's when things start to change. Now, boundaries are very difficult for people pleasers. And again, in my Female Mindset Society group last week, I did a live on people pleasers and people pleasing. And the power of the word no. So that word no is really, really crucial. It's healthy. It's not bad. And saying no to the right things will actually allow you to be able to say yes to the other things that are the right things for you. We have to remember that you are here on this planet as a unique being to live your life, not someone else's. And as I mentioned last week, people pleasing will only take you to a place where you start to live other people's lives. And that's what some people start to do. And that's what I did for a little while. I took on someone else's values, some other values, and was living somebody else's life. No wonder I got lost. No wonder I didn't know who the hell I was anymore. Yeah, it's very common for mums when you have your children, but also when you get married. Things change. Things really, really change. But you have to make sure that you know yourself as an individual as well as a couple and a family unit. I've worked with clients who have had this with business partners. They feel disempowered by their business partner. It's not their business partner who's disempowering them. They're disempowering themselves because they haven't set these boundaries. They haven't worked out what those values are. They've not communicated. It's one big thing that all needs to be done. It is the jigsaw, and the different pieces of the jigsaw need to be put in place. Tolerations. So, tolerations means to put up with or to allow. Whether it's certain things that are happening, whether it's people's behaviour towards you, it might even be people's behaviour towards other people around you. When you're not stepping in and you feel, well, actually I should step in here because this behaviour goes against, like, my bad, I don't agree with this. But you just keep quiet so as not to rock the boat, so as not to upset anybody. But what are you doing by having these, like, by tolerating all of this stuff? You're upsetting yourself. You're not pleasing yourself. You're just pleasing everybody else. And internally, you're becoming a stressed out, anxious mess. Who wants that? While everybody else is carrying on as normal. So you've internalised everything. So it's all gone in here. Everyone outside, life outside of you is just carrying on as normal. But inside you've put all of this in without even realising. So tolerating the wrong things will cause stress and anxiety, as I've mentioned. It sort of goes without saying, really. Because you're not living your life, you're living through other people. It also totally clutters the mind. And I know I've mentioned before, and I've worked with clients whose external environment tells me everything I need to know about what's going on in here. The external clutter is because internally there's loads of clutter that they haven't dealt with. External clutter, internal clutter, it's all one clutter. The cognitive, which is the mind clutter, leads to the behavioural clutter around you. It also comes from procrastination and being indecisive clutter. And we become indecisive when we don't know what values we're making decisions on. We don't know how we're making those decisions. Because we don't know where we're making those decisions from, if they're right or wrong, because we're not living in alignment with who we are. So what are you putting up with? And like I mentioned before, we're just doing external at the moment. What are you putting up with? Who are you putting up with externally that you should not be putting up with? You shouldn't be putting up with it. There are going to be things that you know that you've said to yourself, oh, well, there's no point saying anything. Oh, there's no point saying anything because they won't listen. Oh, there's no point saying anything because they'll just rock the boat. Oh, I can't upset them because of such and such and such and such. Rubbish. You have to. You really, really do have to. So, how do these things make you feel? You need to look and write down all the things that you are tolerating at the moment that you shouldn't be tolerating. Write them in one side of a column. In the other side of the column, write down how they make you feel. The other thing is, are you going back on things that you've told yourself? So do you know that there's certain things that you're not prepared to tolerate? And you're like, no, I'm not tolerating that. So outside you're saying, I won't tolerate that. I won't tolerate that. And then it comes and taps you on the shoulder. Oh, there it is. Oh, never mind, I'll just brush that under the carpet. Just brush it under the carpet. And you've got this big rug in the middle of your room. Big emotional rug that you've just gone, oh, shove that under there. Deal with that later. That's all your tolerations under there. How big is the rug in the middle of your room with all the things that you're tolerating? Dare you even pick the rug up? Dare you go, oh, no, do you know what? I'm not ready to look under there. I'm just going to push that rug over into the corner of the room. And I won't need to deal with that. So this week, I'd really like you to look at and write down what your personal values are. No one else's values. Don't compare them to anybody else's. Don't look at anybody else's. Yeah, go within. Go within. How it makes you feel. What's your gut telling you? What's your heart and your gut telling you about who you are and what you're doing? Go to those places again when you're looking at those boundaries and setting those boundaries. And do that again when you're looking at your tolerations. Write everything that you're tolerating. Again, you might be able to sit and write some down now. You might need to refer back to some at a later date. Something might come up and you'll go, that's it, I know I'm tolerating that. Say, for example, and this comes under the people pleasing as well. So if you're a people pleaser, your tolerations will be huge. Someone keeps asking to borrow money. This is an easy one, and it happens to us all. So a friend asks to borrow money. It's only a little bit of money. So you think, okay, yeah, I'll lend them. I can do that, it's not a problem. They pay it straight back when they say they're going to. And they do this for a little while, but then it becomes a bit of a habit. And then they keep asking, but then you start to feel yourself getting, quite frankly, a bit pissed off with it. Because you think they're starting to take the mick now. Because it's starting to become a pattern. Because I've said yes, they just think they can keep coming asking me for money all the time. Then it gets to a point where they're not paying you back anymore. Or it takes them longer to pay you back. You have to chase them to pay you back. Is that something you should be tolerating? The answer is no. So find a way of being able to say no to that person. See, without offending them. There are ways of turning around and saying no. We need to find this word no. Or other words that mean the same as no. You need to start pushing back and allowing more time and space for you. For you to go and do the things that you want to do. You need to find more space for you to be able to turn around and say yes to the things you really want to be going and doing or having. It's really hard at first. I know it's really difficult. I found it really difficult because that's the sort of person that I am. But when things get to that point where you start to think, this is making me uncomfortable. In fact, this is stressing me out. I'm getting really annoyed with this. Yeah, that's when a boundary has been crossed and you've started to tolerate something that you shouldn't have. You need to go there, you need to visit it, and you need to bring it back in alignment. So what do you need to say no to? I want you to write down the things that you need to say no to. And I want you to write down the things that you need to start saying yes to. What are the things that you're not doing that you could be doing? Again, this goes back to another one of my lives that I did within my group about the word should. Make space for what you could and stop doing what you should for other people and because of this certain stuff that you're tolerating externally but also internally. So hopefully, and I know you will, because this is a really big one that I do with my clients and I've done on myself. It's a real eye-opener. It really does start to open your mind and switch from that negative to a positive. You can be in such a negative kind of spiral because of this kind of behaviour, because of this stuff that's happening, that you can change. So like I mentioned, I will do another one of these, and I will do them on internal tolerations. So it's things that you're tolerating about yourself that you're not doing or you should be doing about yourself. Yes, we can go deeper on that. But for now, Write down your values, write down your boundaries, and what you're tolerating, what you're saying, what you should be saying no to, and what you should be saying yes to. If you need any help with that, if you are struggling to find out your values or to put those boundaries in place, yeah, please let me know, because I know it's really difficult and people do struggle with it, but there are ways that make it easier. People find it very difficult to then communicate what their boundaries are. So I'm going to do a separate one, like I mentioned, on how to communicate with people effectively, so that they don't straight away be like, oh, I can't believe you just said that. Yeah, because people are going to react with their ego, whether you like it or not. You need to recognise that that's their ego. That's their ego, but that's them. That's for them to deal with internally, not you. You've done your bit, and they need to deal with that. But obviously, if we then go gung-ho in, oh, this is my boundary, and that's not going to be effective. It's not going to get you the results that you want. And trust me, I've done it. I've done it both ways. Yeah, definitely know which way that works. And I've been on the receiving end of a way where it definitely doesn't. So I will do those in the next couple of weeks, guys. But for now, I will leave you to it, because you've heard my voice for long enough and I don't want to send you into a massive overwhelm. So just become aware of these things, start to put some actions and strategies into place to make sure that you've got those. And like I mentioned, if you need any help, then do get in touch. Put something in the group, send me a private message, however you want to do it. But for now, have an amazing day, and I will see you all very soon. Bye.